So today I feel inspired to talk about refuge, the inner critic, shame, the path, and how I believe that particular conception of Dharma, Buddha Dharma, can actually allow us and give us the keys to fully liberating ourselves from shame, from the inner critic, and how the ways that I tried to work with these things were entirely counterproductive and in fact, adversarial until I discovered very particular teachings within the Buddha Dharma related to refuge. And so, without further ado, I'm going to dive right in. And so, the big theme, and I'll be going into this in from many different angles throughout this recording, this talk, is for so long I had this conditioning, this view that the way to work with shame was to overcome it. The way to work with this voice in my head that was so critical of everything that I was doing was to overcome it, was to overpower it, was to beat it at its own game. And I had this sense that through outworking it, through there were these very, I don't think this is where it started, but it was fueled. I was being fueled by these very, very harmful narratives uh, that I was taking in from various different people online, particularly kind of hustle culture stuff. And now I don't want this to be a whole like anti-hustle culture video, but the voice was, there was a voice from, I think, Alex Hermosi, and he basically says, outwork your self-doubt, amount so much evidence that you aren't the person that the shame says that you are, that you overcome it, right? If your shame says I'm not good enough to start a business, his idea, which I don't resonate at all with anymore, was, show up and build a business every day until it's so undeniable, like the external reality is so undeniably in opposition to that belief that eventually you let that belief go. But I think that's actually deeply, deeply harmful and unskillful. And so kind of the core thing to talk about here is how the thing that builds the shame, the thing that builds the inner critic, is the very adversarial relationship that, whether you get it from hustle culture content or just from culture in general, I don't think this is just something in this particular internet culture. I think it's actually just widespread, writ large in our culture and our society, right? Um, this idea that maybe deep down we feel that we're not good enough, that there are, that we don't measure up, that we're inferior to other people. Um, all of these are ultimately, as I see it now, voices or proliferations of shame. When there's a core sense of shame, then these are just the ways that the mind tries to make sense of that shame and build worlds around it, essentially. But it's taking the core assumption, it's believing in the shame. And so I want to talk about how I was able to fruitfully work with this. I now, obviously, there's still shame, there's still inner critic from time to time, but it doesn't have the same bite and sting that it used to by any means. In fact, I wouldn't say that I'm liberated from it, but I would say I am to some degree liberated from it, that there is a lot less dukkha or suffering or pain or uh, struggle with this thing. And it was entirely a psychological move that was, in fact, quite opposite from trying to overcome, trying to outwork, trying to, and not even outwork, but like trying to like act in the world as if it wasn't true in a way that actually had an aversion, a fundamental aversion to that experience, which built it up. And I think that's the core insight, is that this adversarial aversive relationship to the inner critic, to the shame, is the very thing that keeps it and locks it in place. No matter how much we try to overcome it, if we could try to overcome it for the next 5 decades of our life, but if underneath that desire to overcome, which usually the desire to overcome has aversion in it, if underneath that there is a fundamental aversive relationship to a I don't want this shame, I don't want this inner critic, I don't like this, I wish I didn't have this, if that is the fundamental relationship with that experience, then that experience will never go away. In fact, it will actually intensify. And I think this is the the cosmic joke, so to speak, or one facet of the cosmic joke, is that we try so desperately, or at least I tried so desperately for so many years, to overcome this negative part of myself that I didn't like. And now I'm not just gonna say like accept it, or some simple answer like that, because I actually don't think the solution is that simple. And I want to try to elucidate some of the solution space that worked really well for me. And so this particularly the idea of a refuge. And so through various different teachers, if you've read my stuff, you could probably guess who they are. But particularly Robert Bea, Pema Chodron, the Buddha, and I think one other person as well. But Pema Chodron was kind of part of the catalyst, as well as Robert Bea. I kind of found them at the same time. And they both kind of have this sense of like, what is the softest relationship, most gentle relationship with the thing that is possible? And in a period of deep struggle in my life, I found this and I started testing out and getting curious about what is this inner critic? What is this shame? How can I move gently and hold this experience more skillfully without wishing that it was not here? Um, and although that's helpful, which I think that's like the first move and one of the most helpful, skillful moves, I don't think that alone is enough, right? Because or at least the thing that did it for me was this idea of refuge, this idea. And so this is in the Buddha Dharma quite a lot. A lot of the times, in order to become a monk or to take the vows of Buddhism, one the language around that is often to take refuge in the Buddha, to take refuge in the Dharma, to take refuge in Sangha, or AKA community. And it shows up. I was just reviewing it. A noble disciple has gone for refuge to the Dhamma. This is the second stream of merit that leads to whatever is wished for, loved, and agreeable to one's welfare and happiness. And so this is from In the Buddha's Words by Bhikkhu Bodhi, kind of just like a hodgepodge of discourses from the various different suttas. Um, but the reason why refuge, I believe, is a key component to overcoming shame and inner critic is because the refuge, for me, allowed the conceptual framework in the view that in order to properly let go of the inner critic, like the inner critic and the shame, it served a purpose. It was trying to help me navigate the world, and it was in response to deeply painful experiences in relationship, right? For example, if I felt like I was in a friendship and then got hurt, then the shame is almost like a response to that. But I think the thing that I was getting wrong for so long was then I would take that and I would try to like psychoanalyze the shame, but it never really worked. The thing that did it for me to some degree is to really cultivate a uh, beautiful place that was more nourishing to the psyche, to the being, to the heart than that shame. And obviously, like, I don't think anyone would think of the inner critic as a nourishing psychological abode. But there is something operating there. There is some like craving for some form of subtle love there, which is why it continues. And so the refuge for me was the thing that did it. The refuge was in cultivating compassion and the Brahma Viharas, which I'll go into in a second. there was this like aha moment, this light bulb that, oh wow, these are actually so much more nourishing than anything that I could possibly get from other people. And I'm not saying that like complete solitude is the answer. I'm saying that relationship that's grounded in this recognition that the deepest refuge is within, then relationships are so much better. And so I think the core question is, how does one actually cultivate this? And one, developing a deeply soft relationship with our own suffering, meeting our own suffering. Oh wow, there's shame here. And then meeting it softly, coming close with it, getting intimate with it in a way that's deeply loving. One, two, seeing and releasing identification with it. And so, not in a way of like, there's this practice in Buddhism, anatta, which essentially means not self. And the practice is I meet the inner critic and then I see it as not me, not mine. And this is very different from saying it's not me, therefore I'm pushing it away. It's saying, this is not who I am. These are thoughts that are arising from conditions. These thoughts of this inner critic and all these thoughts that go with this inner critic, they're actually arising out of this shame and this malnourishment of the heart. And so to see that clearly, I believe actually unlocks this anatta practice, which is, oh, these thoughts are not like my thoughts. They're arising out of this condition. And if there's a different condition which can be cultivated, this condition that we could call a refuge, a divine abode, as it's called in Buddhism. This refuge actually is a better form of conditions that when I drop into that and coax my being with those more wholesome conditions, the inner critic doesn't even arise. It is a dependent arising because it arises dependent on the quality of the heart. And so therefore this inner critic is not me, it's not mine. It's dependent on conditions. And if the conditions change, the inner critic ultimately doesn't arise at all when the conditions are more wholesome. And so there's this passage from Sing That Frees by Robert Bea that I was just reviewing this morning that I want to bring in here, and it's that the confidence to let go, and basically it's a passage where he's talking about the benefits of samadhi practice. Samadhi meaning like this harmonization, this unification of the mind, of the heart, which is very, very accessible. I've been practicing it a lot this month, and wow, it's such a beautiful practice. But let me go into the passage. Among its many benefits, a dedication to samadhi can bring a certain juiciness to practice and to life, and this can provide a vital resource of wholesome and profound nourishment. In particular, the well-being that it includes can be crucial. There may be times, for example, when we know it would be best to let go of an unhelpful attachment, but somehow we just can't. Perhaps at a certain level, we feel somewhat desperate and unable to imagine that we could be okay without this thing that we are clinging to. Perhaps even unconsciously, we worry that letting it go would render us bereft of what we believe we need for our happiness or even our survival. If, however, we can have access to and develop a reservoir of profound inner well being, it makes letting go of what is not so helpful much easier. We feel that we have enough, so letting go is not so scary. Over the long term, repeated and regular immersion in such well being supports the emergence of a steadiness of genuine confidence. We come to know beyond doubt that happiness is possible for us in this life. And because this deep happiness we are experiencing is originating from within us, we begin to feel less vulnerable to and dependent on the uncertainties of changing external conditions. Um, we may also find that a relatively frequent taste of some degree of samadhi helps our confidence in the path to become much more firmly established. Gaining confidence in these ways will have a profound effect on the sense we have of our own lives and their potential without making us aloof. And while it certainly can occur, my experience in practice and in teaching is that a stagnation in feelings of bliss and peace is really quite rare. Rather than being a source of attachment, samadhi is greatly supportive of letting go and non clinging in our lives in general. And so the idea here is that one, this is possible, and two, two that this is possible, right? And I think that this has been the thing that's been so mind-bogglingly in my face lately is realizing that this samadhi is possible, and through cultivating this in my life to the degree that I've been able to. There's always deeper, more refined degrees, but through learning this skill of samadhi and of the Brahma Viharas of loving kindness. You may have seen my post Metta is a complete path to awakening. Um, Insight ways of looking. There's all of these different practices that Buddhism offers, but I think that the most beautiful thing is through the cultivation of these practices, the sense of okayness is deepened. The sense that this experience right now is enough. I think that sense deepens with the samadhi, and then as the samadhi deepens, and I almost don't even want to use this word because I have a sense that if you hear the word samadhi, it's going to register as like this is a state out there that you have to attain. But maybe just saying as the mind, as the heart is more nourished and the body is more coherent and unified through working with the relationship of it, not just cultivating attention, but cultivating how the attention is in relationship with our experience. Oh, there's hardship. Okay. Does my mind immediately say, I don't want this here. I don't like this. I wish this wasn't here. How do I overcome this? Which is the adversarial relationship. Or what I'm trying to get at is the samadhi is a byproduct of over and over and over again taking any hardship that is experienced in our body and our mind, seeing it as an opportunity to develop a more skillful relationship with it. And so our goal is never, I mean, maybe sometimes, but I don't hold the goal to attain and stabilize any state. Now, you could say samadhi is a state, but the goal for me is never like, I need to like attain and stabilize that. And until I do that, I'm not there. More so, it's in any moment of my life, and this is something that's really beautiful, and I think it's actually in this book as well. But in any moment of my life, um, I almost want to find this place. Yeah, here it is. So something that's been really helpful is whenever there's like a painful self contraction, whether it's like getting rejected on a date or whether it's like see someone ghosting me, or um, not like trying to like grow a business and running into these failures, which are so inevitable. The mind will usually contract around, okay, I'm not good enough for this, or this means this about me, and this means I'm not doing it right. In the cell, like it's just such a habitual thing to any experience that we have to view it through, what does this mean about me? What does this mean about who I am, about my essence, right? And rather, what I've been practicing and training, and it's been a very, very fun thing to practice, is this sense of whenever there's like a pain and suffering that's in the present experience. Suffering is a strong word. If you're in the Buddha Dharma community, it's like a very common word. And I say this to say that like there's subtle degrees of suffering. When I say suffering, I don't mean like the most intense suffering of my life. I mean, like sometimes there's like subtle variations of just pain, struggle, you know. When that's there, like I just got rejected, and then the self is just like in this like inner critic shame spiral. The view that's been helpful for me is it's just always thank you, thank you. It's just thank you, thank you, thank you. This person rejects me. I think I wrote a piece on this at one point. Thank you for rejecting me. Because why? Like, why am I saying thank you? It's not just like thank you for hurting me. That would just be masochism. But it's like thank you for giving me the opportunity to understand how my heart and mind are generating suffering in relationship to these conditions, and therefore to become free, to become more free. Thank you for the opportunity to become more free. So someone rejects me, and it's like, okay, the mind is contracted, it's turning into this self view that hurts, it's blame, and it's like, thank you for giving me like for pressing this button in me that's deeply painful, and allowing me to see this deeply painful structure of mind that I would not have otherwise been able to see if you would not have rejected me, right? And this is how Rob talks about the deepening of samadhi practice in the two, he calls them wise attitudes to the hindrances. So if there's anxiety, worry, doubt, uh, whatever, these are what are called the hindrances. And it's like, but I think it applies to anything in our life. So the two wise attitudes discussed above, not to take things personally and not to believe the thoughts and the perspectives that these hindrances bring up. So if I feel rejected, there's like now this means this about me and this is who I am and I am not good at this. And we take it so personally, right? We believe it. And he says not to take it personally, not to believe the perspectives. If we learn to do these two things alone, that would be of huge benefit. Um, for hindrances do not just arise in formal meditation, they are states that impact our life and our well-being every day. And if we can and this is the part that I wanted to get at, and if we can maintain a stance that no matter what the conditions, asks always, what can I learn here? The times of hindrances in samadhi practice can be as genuinely valuable as the times that feel good. And so what can I learn here? And it's not just like what is the lesson? Like, oh, someone rejected me. What is the lesson? I mean, you could say that's what the question is, but I think there's like a subtext here is, what can I learn here in the context of, okay, how, and this is one of the last things I wanted to say. How is suffering arising in this moment? And then as the struggle fades out over time, which it always does, right? Like we get one rejection, we're not suffering forever. Like eventually we get free of it. But it's like, how does that cessation of suffering happen? How does that fading of that struggle happen? How does it arise? How does it happen? And what is a skillful way of working with it? What conditions in the mind and the heart are in place that is locking this pain in place? And can I learn to notice those conditions and to skillfully work with them, right? And so if that sounds a little bit abstract, let me try to make it more practical here. Um, so one of the things that really struck me as I was reading the book In the Buddha's Words, the Buddhist Sutras, translation by Bhikkhu Bodhi, was this sense over and over and over and over again that the Buddha is saying, okay, what are the Four Noble Truths, right? He's saying the Four Noble Truths. And I've heard this before, and it's just like, there is suffering, there is an end to suffering. Buddha Dharma is the Eightfold Path is that, and or I think I missed one. Craving, there is suffering. Craving is what causes suffering. There is an end. The end is the Eightfold Path, and like you kind of hear this, and it's like, okay, well, craving is the cause. So I need to like get rid of craving, and the Eightfold Path is how I do that. But there's a particular language in there which I never really like got until recently, which was the Buddha says it over and over again. So let's say there's a hindrance, or let's say there's a defilement, there's greed, there's hatred, there's ill will. The Buddha says, notice how, the word how, notice how greed arises, how greed fades, how the cessation of greed can be maintained. The word how. And I think that's the big shift that was really insightful for me, is that before I would be like, that. Notice that there is greed. Notice that greed fades. But ultimately, it's like, okay, how? What are the conditions that allow for this thing called greed or ill will, hatred, or um, aversion to arise? Like, what is that condition? And so, when someone rejects me, when I am coming in contact with reality and the messiness of human relationships, and it triggers this deep struggle. It's like that is the perfect opportunity to say, how is this condition giving rise to suffering? Is it possible to become more free within the context of this relationship, not by transcending the relationship and going and living in the Himalayas or anywhere but by yourself? How is it possible to get free within the context of this? What is the actual mechanism? What is the actual structure of how the mind is building this? And through seeing that this is dependent on conditions, I see that it is possible that this struggle, this rejection is not objectively independently existingly bad and oppressive to me. It's that there's this condition that we could regard as very unpleasant, but then the mind builds it into more than that, right? It's the second arrow. And so the interesting thing for me is, no, okay, there's a rejection, and then it's like, okay, but then also there's a dependent arising. There's a way in which the the rejection is through the conditions that are present in my heart being built up to mean more than it actually does. And then it's like, okay, so how could could the cultivation of the heart and the mind actually create different conditions where there's a rejection and it has almost no pain, almost no struggle? In fact, maybe it's even fun, maybe it's even pleasant. Maybe there's deep freedom in it. And yeah, I've not learned this alone. I learned this through many teachers of mine. Um, so I think that's all for today. There's always a lot more to discuss, but deep refuge. Actually, let me go into refuge a little bit more. I truly believe 1000%. I know, I don't even believe it, I know it, that it's possible to cultivate this deep refuge, this deep sense of satisfaction that has nothing to do with the outside world. And now, if you want to go really advanced, you could, look into the jhanas and stuff like this. But even just deep, cultivating deep well wishing, metta, may you be happy, may you be safe. Like, in just making this, like bringing this into the life, right? One of my favorite practices is driving on the interstate, driving on the highway, and I see the cars, and every car is like an object of metta, right? So, not the car, the person in the car. May you be happy. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you get to your destination safely. May you be protected from the hindrances of your mind. May you be happy, right? And it might sound goofy to someone that's not familiar with the Buddhist tradition, but like, through that giving of well wishing, the heart is nourished. The samadhi deepens in the life, not on obviously on the cushion too, but in the life. And then it's like, okay, how does the heart want to give? Okay, maybe service, right? And so then it's like, okay, maybe I should volunteer somewhere. Not as my full-time job. I don't need to drop everything, but like, what would it look like to add 1% more of bringing that into the actual actions? Or I'm like working and I'm doing my job. I'm working, building my business. And I'm like, rather than like, oh, I don't have enough money, I'm not going to survive. What would it be like? And I've been asking myself, like, what would it be like to add 1% more of the view that this is of service, right? So I'm working and I'm like, yeah, this kind of sucks at times, but like, how is this of service? Can I make the way that I'm showing up actually the reason I'm offering this? Literally, we call it a service. The service, I'm helping businesses, you know, understand AI or something, just my business. But it's like of service. It's like this person is afraid of not being secure because of the vast changes in AI. And I'm like, I am like this person that is of service, that is helping them make this transition in service of more safety, service of more security in their life. Now, is that the most effective way to bring freedom? I don't know, but bringing the quality of how could this be of service is like, it changes the relationship. It makes, and then it shows me that career in and of itself is empty as well, that is being constructed through my relationship with it. And so recently I was working yesterday, I think it was, and I was having a blast, and I was like, oh, I've been hating my career, and I felt so oppressed by it. But it's like I wasn't able to see that there was even a relationship with career that was aversive. So obviously we start on the cushion, we practice developing a more skillful relationship with ourselves. But then as a result, that bleeds out into what is a skillful relationship with other people, with the idea of career, of with work. Even if the thing I'm not doing is my dream job, like I'm not like, doing philosophical dialogues and meditating, like, and writing beautiful expositions. That that's my dream job. If that wasn't clear. Um, but like, no, I'm just like doing tech work. I'm behind a computer all day. But how is there a dependent arising in this as well? What would it look like to make this more of service, right? And maybe someday I'll move more towards the dream job, but maybe this is the dream job. Maybe it's possible to have deep freedom in this context too. And that is the core idea. And so as there's this well wishing, as there the well wishing refines the heart, brings more samadhi, brings more harmonization, enjoyment, ultimately happiness, right? The well wishing brings happiness, and I think that's what Buddhism is getting at, is that you realize that operating in the world from this sense that there is a self that is a self that is insecure. This is actually a place of operating that is, there's no security there, because we're always trying, we feel incomplete and we feel lack, so we're trying to acquire more and more and more and more in order to try to feel like we're secure and have enough. And Buddhism is kind of saying, notice that that's not possible. And like a lot of us know, yeah, you can never get enough money. It's never going to make you, like, you can chase and make billions and still feel not enough. Like, we kind of know that on the surface level, but do you know that deep down in the core of your being? And I think what Buddha Dharma is saying is like, okay, start practicing metta, loving kindness. Notice that, like, when you really, really, really wish someone happiness and safety and ease and peace, notice that your happiness in your own heart goes up by magnitudes, right? And it doesn't even have to be people that are like in front of you physically. You can literally close your eyes. Who is an easy person to give love to? May you be loved. And it's like, wow, it's like, actually, I feel happy the more I do that, right? And then it becomes obvious that giving well wishing, and and then when that well wishing meets suffering, it turns into compassion. And then when that well wishing meets happiness, it turns into mudita, or altruistic joy, happiness for the happiness of others. Someone else is succeeding and you feel happy for them, mudita. And it drops this insight into the being that, oh, this is what actually creates happiness in this life. And it becomes so obvious that we can't avoid it anymore. This is something I've been grappling with in my life, is how many of my the ways that I was going about the world were operating on this sense that was entirely backwards from that. And then it's like, now I have to like invert. I have to invert my whole life. Not have to. Now that this is seen clearly, it's like there's actually no desire to keep doing the things that obviously cause struggle. And so the idea here is like, okay, this is what causes happiness. I know it, right? And another thing from the sutras that really stood out to me was this idea of danger, of pits. And one of the things that Buddha says is, notice the danger in trying. And so when let me take a step back. I think one of the core ideas here that is so practical in Buddhism is this idea that, and this relates to the idea of refuge, that these places that we are trying to find satisfaction, that we're trying to find refuge and salvation in, could not possibly provide that refuge and that salvation because they're impermanent, because they're changing, because our view of them is filled with ignorance, avidya, that we think that these things exist, that money is a thing that is a real, and that if we acquire and have enough of it, then we will, like, that'll be our salvation. We don't use the word salvation, but like we will be finally free and secure and finally able to relax. And that's where freedom is. And the Buddha's saying, you that's not where freedom is. And if you believe freedom is there, you are going to suffer, right? And and this is something that really struck me at my core. There's a deep kind of soul making in this for me. I won't go into what I mean by soul making. That's a whole other conversation. But the idea is like I'm starting to go through the world and it's like, okay, how is the desire for or how is the idea that this thing is going to be a refuge? Sense pleasure, like, oh, food, sex, fame, success, um, what else? A nice apartment. Um, what else? Anything pleasurable, right? And he's basically saying all the things of the world are so alluring because they give us this hit of dopamine, just movies and food and alcohol and um, sex and fame. Like these things, they feel good in the moment, but then they cause even they're dangerous. They're dangerous. There's a bunch of analogies like falling into a pit of snakes or something like that that the Buddha uses to try to show us like these are dangerous. And the way to freedom, when we see and relate to these things as dangerous, that is the very view or relationship or perspective on things that causes freedom. Because if we don't, then we will still subtly believe that there's a refuge there. That if we just get enough food, that's the refuge. Like, oh, I just had a hard day and I feel so stressed and burnt out. Let me like watch some TV, and like subtly we believe that distraction, that checking out of our experience is where the refuge is. Or maybe we don't believe it's an ultimate refuge. We still believe there's a refuge there, right? And so I've been playing with this. It's like, it's not that those are bad. It's not that food is bad. Obviously, you need food. It's not that sex is bad. Like, there can be deep soul making in romance, in romantic connection. But it's like, that is not, and I think this is actually a healthier way of relating with life, right? Because if I think this person, this potential romantic partner is going to be my refuge, that's how we relate to these objects of craving. I don't want to use the word desire, because I think there's healthy desire, but craving, clinging. What pushes a partner away more than anything? Clinging. But what is the clinging to a partner? It's deep down in my being, I don't feel nourished. I don't feel whole. And so I think that this object of my desire, this person, will be the refuge, will be the thing that will make me feel whole. That's what a refuge is in my eyes. It's the thing that we believe will make us feel whole. And so we grasp onto all these things in the world as maybe this will make me whole, maybe this will make me whole. And what the Buddha is saying is like, one, it won't, because it changes. And so if this person chooses to not accept that ask, then we're going to suffer because we put all of our eggs in that basket as what's going to make us whole, you know. And ultimately, what the Buddha is saying is there is actually a place that is completely independent of all of these things that are changing. There's this unchanging, I don't want to call it a place. There's some, I don't even want to call it a thing. It's so subtle and hard to talk about. There is a way, let's just say there's a way to find deep satisfaction that has nothing to do with anything in the external world that changes. That's the core idea, right? And how does one actually deep into that? Well, through insight and through samadhi, right? And yeah, so that it's possible to cultivate qualities of mind and heart that are deeply nourishing, even if there's always deeper levels, more and more degrees of freedom. I think there's still an initial choice. I feel some when I receive love from this person, it makes me feel whole, and so I'm gonna like put all my eggs in that basket and crave that thing. Or there's like a recognition where, oh wow, that felt really good when that person gave me all this approval and validation and love. Then you see how the mind instantly like moves towards it and tries to grasp towards it. And then I think in that moment when the mind does that, that moment is the opportunity point. It's the opportunity point to say, wait, maybe this is actually dangerous. Maybe I shouldn't put maybe I shouldn't mistakenly believe that this person, this object of desire is the thing that's going to make me feel whole. Maybe I can actually continue to cultivate this quality of mind that allows me to access that completely independent of this person. And then I don't want to say like after from a temporal standpoint. Like I think you can be in relationship and cultivating these qualities at the same time. I don't think it's like a if this then that sort of thing. Once I cultivate samadhi, then I can get in a relationship. You can cultivate samadhi within a relationship, right? But there's like this consistent like seeing clearly the dangers of trying to find refuge in things that change, and then making the conscious choice to cultivate a refuge in the thing that is actually a refuge, that actually doesn't change. And that is a 20-hour long episode to dive into what that is. And I don't even it's something I'm actively investigating and exploring, right? And so now I think we're getting to the end of this. So refuge, the danger of craving, more so that like holding the lens that it's dangerous is actually deeply helpful and wise is kind of the summation of all of that. And then not taking things to mean something about my essence, about who I am, all this. I think that's one of the biggest things is, oh, there's deep pain and suffering. Can we I think the challenge that we're being asked through the maturation process, through the spiritual maturation process, is it possible to contact deep suffering and struggle without feeling like it means something about our essence? That is the move, or at least that's the move that I've found is very supportive in cultivating freedom, right? There is suffering, and it's like, how does this suffering arise? And can I see that when I take this suffering to mean something about my essence, the suffering intensifies and gets worse, and that the intensification of it is entirely a product of holding the view that it means something about me, and that I actually have the capacity to choose a view that this suffering is not about me, it's not mine, and therefore to contact this suffering without intensifying it. And now there's always deeper and more subtle levels of that identification of that process of like, okay, it's not me, not mine. Then you can even there's even deeper levels of that, right? But again, just like it's just one step at a time. It's what does it look like to go 1% towards more freedom? How does that work? Could I and that's the biggest thing that I've been loving recently has been is that the goal that the path is dynamic, it's alive. The goal is not this like dead thing of just do this technique forever until you become free. And if you're suffering right now, then just keep doing it and eventually it'll bring you satisfaction. Like that's entirely backwards. I think it's have this playful, alive, dynamic aliveness where you're investigating. There is suffering. Oh, okay. What is this? How does this work? What would bring more freedom here? what would bring more compassion? What would bring a more compassionate, gentle relationship with this? Why? What is causing this adversarial relationship with this thing? And that active dynamic investigation and playfulness, I think, is the thing that allows the momentum to build towards deeper degrees of freedom. And so, thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day, and I hope this was in service of your freedom, of your happiness, of your peace.